from guys that have been there before, guys at the end of their careers, and they talk to you about how I used to work narcs, and I was so into it that I'd miss my kids' games, I'd miss that, and now it's 15 years later, and I'm thinking, why was I there every day? I had an opportunity to go to that game, or I had an opportunity to see my daughter dance or whatever it is, and the regrets they had, and luckily them sharing that with me realized, like, okay, I can't make the same mistakes guys have made in the past.
To say that it's difficult is an understatement. I don't think that most people realize what it takes to have a career like that, certainly have 28 years, and the effect that it can potentially have on every aspect of your life.
I don't know why we still fight it. If I was going to give you a free personal trainer, you'd take it, right?
In a minute.
When it comes to mental health, you're like, oh, no, I don't want any part of that.
Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast. I'm your host, Chris Logan. This is First Responder Wellness podcast. If you're not familiar with First Responder Wellness, we are a mental health and addiction facility dedicated to public safety. We treat first responders for all of the stress that comes with being first responders and all of the issues that they deal with when it comes to mental health. Today we have a really good guest here who's had his own bouts of dealing with things when it comes to being a first responder. And so I will let him introduce himself and talk to you a little bit about who he is. The goal here today is really to kind of get to know who he is, the role that he's played in the first responder realm, some of the things that he's learned along the way, and kind of what it is that he's doing today. So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are.
Chris, thanks for having me. My name's Cord Vandergrift. I just retired maybe about a year and a half ago. I used to work for the Westminster Police Department. I was there 28 years. Got into law enforcement kind of like when I was done with college. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. Actually, my biological dad was an officer who I didn't have much contact with. He was an alcoholic, wasn't the greatest guy in the world. And when I finished college, I thought, man, I want to do it right. I want to be one of those guys, to give a good example and exciting job. And I figured, well, I'm done with college, so let's go for it. And that's how I got involved in law enforcement. Grew up local in Huntington Beach.
Okay.
I'm married now. I got 3 kids. Just dropped a daughter off at college. It was a sad day. Got another boy who's about to graduate college and one in high school. And got involved with this place by being introduced to Nancy from the counseling team when I was at Westminster. And she always told me, hey, when you're done with work, let me know, and we got somewhere I can use you. And I said, all right, great.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of had some of that in your mind and thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So you get out of college and walk us through a little bit of what that was like, kind of transitioning out of college and where you went from there.
Like I said, I'm like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
I can't go surfing every day and live in my parents' house anymore. So I need to get a job. So I enrolled at Golden West Police Academy and self-sponsored myself there. Started going through the academy, and then Westminster came in, tested with Westminster, and the rest is there. 28 years there. Loved my career there. Got a chance to pretty much do everything at that department. Was on the SWAT team for 25 years.
Wow.
Loved it. I wouldn't take anything back. It's the greatest career you can have. I loved every minute of it. Yeah. And when I left, I wasn't like, I want to leave. It was like, it's time to do something else. I was every day still happy to go in. So yeah, I loved it.
And you did all of your time there in Westminster?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a rough little city.
It's perfect. It's small enough, but it's still exciting enough. There's plenty of things to do. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and they treated me well there.
Yeah. So you got started early on. Talk to us a little bit about being a rookie. What were some of the things that kind of stand out to you now early on, and how did you kind of transform into becoming, the SWAT guy and all that stuff? Tell us a little bit early on.
I think, actually, I'm going to tell you a story in a little while about my first FTO, who had a big impact on me. But I think in most careers, it's pretty similar, as there's 1 or 2 people that you kind of latch on to early. And there are a couple guys that I met early that were mentors for me my entire career and really preached, kind of family first, like this is a job. When you're here, do the best possible job you can do, be, the most honest, hardest working guy you can, but this isn't your life. Like, your life is your family and your friends and those kind of things. And man, I appreciate those guys. And through my entire career, I always try to tell the guys that I grew up with, like, hey, you got to realize when it's over, it's over. I think, and I'm talking to, guys going through the Retire Well course, one of the courses we offer here,
Yep.
It's hard when you leave if you think that defines you. So
Yeah.
luckily I had a lot of guys that taught me early, it doesn't define you. And I get texts now from guys I appreciate so much, like, man, I'm so glad you taught me that, because it's so much easier to transition out of the job,
Yeah. Share with us a little bit about what that was like, right? How was it for you to be able to transition in and through those things while focusing on family? What were some of the things that you feel like were relative to what you were doing and kind of where you are now?
I think it's just the never getting discouraged. Like, I can remember, I think I put in for the SWAT team 3 times before I made it, put in for detective 2 or 3 times before I made it. And you see a lot of younger kids now get like real discouraged when they don't get something the first time. And luckily I had people telling me, like, hey, you'll get it eventually, just don't give up, keep a positive attitude. And we all know, those who have been in law enforcement, it's a tough job, and there's going to be horrible things that happen, and you're going to go through times where you're depressed or different things happen, and that's where you got to kind of maintain the focus of the big picture of life. And are we happy? Are we healthy? Let's not focus on these negative things. Let's not think that someone's out to get me, or I didn't get this because of that, or whatever it is. Just remain positive. So I had a lot of real good guys in my life that kept me positive, and that's so important. It's so important in your career, and then I think it's even more important in retirement afterwards, when a lot of those things kind of slip away that you're used to,
Yeah, and we see a lot of that here, with the men and women that end up here. I think that's one of the things that they don't have towards the end of things kind of, getting out of control. So they don't have a lot of support, or they've kind of pushed away that support, and those healthy people, they're no longer in contact with the mentors and the people that were, helping keep them balanced and things like that, which is really what I'm hearing from you. It was like having these good mentors, having these people look out for me, and then along the lines, further down, becoming that mentor, becoming somebody that was helping, other people kind of move through this thing effectively and efficiently so that they could survive. Right? I think to survive a law enforcement career, I don't think that's inappropriate to say, right? Because there's so much that's, to say that it's difficult is an understatement, right? I don't think that most people realize what it takes to have a career like that, certainly have 28 years in that, and the effect that it can potentially have on every aspect of your life. What I'm hearing you say is that being able to focus on family and those sorts of things was something that was really important to you, and it helped keep you balanced and healthy and able to have a successful career. Not a lot of people are able to do that, and I think that's an important piece. I also like what you said about not allowing it to be your identity. That's one of the biggest things that we work on, and you're working with people in Retire Well, you've lived it yourself, peeling people away from that identity and helping them to understand, like, that's not who you are, right? That was your job, or it is your job. It's not what defines you as a person, and so many people get lost in that. What do you think for you, so we can kind of get to know you a little bit more, what do you think for you kept you from falling into that being your identity?
Yeah, I think it's just the realization from guys that have been there before, guys that had been already through their careers, guys at the end of their careers, and they talk to you about, hey, let me tell you the mistakes I make. I used to work narcs, and I was so into it that I'd miss my kids' games. I'd miss that, and now it's 15 years later, and I'm thinking, why was I there every day? Why was I there, on this when I had an opportunity to go to that game, or I had an opportunity to see my daughter dance or whatever it is, and the regrets they had. And luckily, them sharing that with me realized, like, okay, I can't make the same mistakes guys have made in the past. And mental health is a big thing. Like, when I started, we had a trauma support team. I think Westminster was the first team in Orange County to have a trauma support team actually has started. And but it still was not a talk. It's barely cracking the surface now.
Yeah.
And that's why I love what I'm doing now, going to briefings and talking to these guys and encouraging them to reach out and get some help. And the attitude's starting to change. But back then, to be honest, we went out and drank afterwards. That's how we dealt with critical incidents, which is, about the most unhealthy thing you can do. So, it was, like I said, I think it's not just law enforcement, it's any career. If you find people that really care about you, and when people genuinely care about you, you can tell, those people can change your life. So I was lucky to have some of those people in my life, and hopefully I've done that for some of the people in my life, Oh,
I'm sure that you have. And I have to imagine sitting where you're at today and looking at, law enforcement today and the way that policing is being done is completely different too, right? And I'm sure the guys before you looked at when you were doing it and saying like, it's just not what it used to be, But I really do think that there's a huge shift in, in society and the way that we see things and the way the way that law enforcement is portrayed these days. And I think that adds a different aspect and a level of difficulty to what it is that our men and women in law enforcement are dealing with, right? And I think that's where focus on mental health is even more important, right? Is really coming in and ensuring that they have the appropriate resources, places like first responder wellness and the counseling team and these critical incident teams that didn't even exist, which is, it's interesting when you think about like something as simplistic as like having somebody come out just to check on your people.
Yeah, there's a fear. And the fear still exists, but the fear is if I admit that something's wrong, I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
I'm not, they're going to get me out of here as quick as they can. And that fear still exists, but back then we definitely never said anything, no matter how you were feeling, just because we thought it made you look weak, which is not true. And we were worried about what's going to happen. Are they going to give me a fit for duty? You still hear guys talk about that today. But I think we're turning the corner there, and I think that people are starting to realize, agencies are realizing, like, it's important to take care of their people. And the first priority is getting them healthy, and that's what everyone's moving towards. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think there's, and this, and then I'll have you talk a little bit more about kind of the shift of things and, the things that we're seeing, right? And back to this idea that, even just a few years ago, those sorts of things didn't exist, right? And then Westminster says, we're going to be the first ones to have these debriefing teams come on. And people, I think, are now really starting to utilize that stuff. And I think a lot of it is, to your point, is that they're finding that it's okay and that it's safe and that they're not going to be punished for it, right? And that's every law enforcement officer's worst nightmare, is to have their gun and badge taken because they don't seem fit for duty. And it's just so unfair on so many levels, to expect what we expect out of them and then have them just like, they're just supposed to be okay with it. And it's like, no, man, it's going to affect them, and we've got to figure out ways to help them manage that and get them through that so that they can continue to do what it is that most of them love to do. It's like listening to you talk about it and kind of watching you light up in the ways of like, man, that was a great career. Like, I enjoyed doing what I was doing, right? And 28 years and 25 of that being on the SWAT team. I'm sure you've got stories on stories of things that, you've been involved in. But to say that, you were honored to do that and that it was an effective career, that's pretty cool, So what are some of the things that got you into, I know that you talked a little bit about early on Nancy coming to you, right? Because, 28 years, that's a good chunk of time. So through that 28 years, what kind of stands out to you for you of what kind of drove you or put you in a position to seek out the work that you're doing now? In other words, get into the mental health field and start helping your fellow officers or first responders with their mental health. And were there ever any challenges that you had to deal with of your own in law enforcement for 28 years?
So I'll tell you the story when I tell it every time I go to a briefing, because I think it's impactful. And it's probably the single greatest event of my life that changed my life is my very first FTO. The very first guy I had when I got to Westminster was a guy named Tom Richard. And he's training me, and his story was when he was brand new. I think when he started training me, maybe he had 5 or 6 years on. But when he was brand new, it was Christmas morning, and he was responding to a foot pursuit. Another officer is in a foot pursuit. It's a car in front of him, goes through the light at Beach and Westminster. Light turns red. He doesn't realize it's red because we get tunnel vision, right? And he's hauling ass, and he hits a minivan and kills 2 16-year-old girls in the minivan. Christmas morning. So he used to talk to me a lot about that, how it affected him. And that was before anything. That was before we started a trauma support team. Was there anything like that? And he would tell me stories about how that night it was rainy and there's a bunch of gasoline spilled in the road. And now when it rains 15 years later, he can smell gasoline in his nose, and there's no gasoline out there, right? How these sensory things get burned in your head, how he never properly dealt with it. He dealt with alcohol abuse because of it for a good part of his life. I worked at the academy for a long time. I was an RTO at the academy. I would bring him in to talk to the class, to tell him the story. They used to use his presentation at EVOC, the driving school, and show the accident and talk about, tunnel vision and everything. And even at EVOC, they'd be like, oh, yeah, he ended up killing himself, or he ended up being out of law enforcement. They tell all these different stories. They had no truth to him. Like, he was still around. They just didn't know what happened to him.
Right.
So he left Westminster. He retired, and he went back to school. He's got his doctorate in psychology, and he was working with, I don't know if you remember Larry Blum, old psychologist.
No.
He was working with him, and he was counseling police and fire, And one day, a knock on my door, and it's one of my best buddies, and he says, hey, Tom killed himself.
Oh, man.
And where did he kill himself? The graveside of the 16-year-old girl that he killed 28 years before that. A demon he could never get out. And I mean, he went back to school, he got his doctorate, he was counseling people. And that just prior to that, we had another Westminster officer commit suicide who he was hoping that he could help out. So I mean, it was just piling on trauma. But so that day, got in the car, had to drive over, tell his wife what had happened, tell his dad what had happened, tell his 2 boys what had happened. Worst day, obviously, I've ever had to deal with.
Sure.
And affected me so much, and really got me into mental health and what can we do to stop this from ever happening again.
Yeah.
And that's when I had the opportunity to come here and start working and tell them that story. And a lot of times I tell that story at briefings, and afterwards guys will come up to me and tell, I've heard that story. And I said, well, have you ever gone to a therapist or asked for help? Or
right.
Well, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do me a favor. Well, why don't you go out and do that? And in full disclosure, I tell them, because when I first started working here, the first 3 months I was at the center, and I sat in the groups and listened to people and did all the different things, EMDR, tried them all out, and it's amazing. I mean, this place changes lives. I would go and I'd talk about it, and in 28 years, how many times I ever saw a therapist? 0, right? And I'd be preaching to these guys like, you need to go see a therapist. You need to reach out for help.
Yeah.
And I came home one day and I just told my wife, I said, man, I cannot be a hypocrite anymore. I can't do this anymore. So she went and found me someone, and I have never been happier. It's been, I mean, you learn so much about yourself and so much about your relationships with my wife, my kids, and it's unbelievable. It's changed me from retirement. I wish I would have done it, when I was working. I would have been a better supervisor. I would have been a better cop, all these things. And people are often say like, wow, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. You can always be better. So when I go to these places, I tell them like, just try it. Please try it once. And I look forward to it so much. It's just so helpful. And I don't know why we still fight it,
Yeah.
If I was going to give you a free personal trainer, you'd take it, right?
In a minute, right?
Yeah. Anything else, like I'm going to give you vitamins, free vitamins, you're going to take it. But when it comes to mental health, you're like, oh, no, I don't want any part of that. Yeah. So that's what got me into it. That's what kind of altered my path. And I can tell you, it's changed me forever, but in a good way. And I think, because of that kind of perspective and a tragic story, and even in the years, I'll tell you, so one other thing that pops in my head is we have a police memorial in front of our place. And I pitched to have his name put on that memorial, right?
Yeah.
No, Still the resistance saying no. And you'd hear guys say, no, suicide's a choice. He made a choice. I think people just don't understand, what it's really all about and how it's not a choice. It's an illness. And still his name still isn't on that to this day. And I hope someday we can kind of acknowledge, if that's not any more work-related, obvious as anything else, it's hard to believe. So.
Yeah, and those are, thank you, for sharing that. And those are just such difficult things to navigate, right? And certainly for the situation that Tom was in, right? It's like, how do you get over something like that? How do you get through something like that when, ultimately he's on the path to try to do the right thing and save, somebody from whatever's going on with his foot pursuit or whatever's happening, and then this tragedy, right? And so I think it's interesting that he dealt with it for so long, and to your point, what drew you into it is now knowing the resources and those sorts of things, and this hope that, if he had the resources, would things have been different? We don't know, but ultimately it's like we'd like to at least be able to offer those things to people so that we, can say, hey, we did everything that we could. We just did a podcast with a guy, and part of his deal was a suicide attempt, and he kind of described it like, I think what he said was, imagine being in a burning building, right? And what he said was, you're looking at this building and the building is going to burn, and you're in it, and you can stay in the building and burn to death, or you can jump out the window and end it all. And that was what he described, kind of what he was going through when he, when everything kind of collapsed on him, and the idea of suicide, just wouldn't leave, and he attempted to kill himself. So, I don't know what the answers are for those sorts of things, and I don't think that people have the right ideas in and around it. And I get it. I get that people think that it's selfish, and that these things don't just, and I've often said it, right? Suicide doesn't take the pain away, it just passes it on. And I don't mean that in the ways of like, what you're doing is selfish, so stop doing what you're doing. I just mean, like, take that into consideration when these things are happening, and let's do something different so that we can, utilize the resources that we have and ultimately get you the relief that you're looking for, right? Because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for this relief.
And it brings me back the day before actually Tom did that. I had coffee with him in Westminster, and we were talking about the other officer at our department who had committed suicide, fairly recently before that. And some of the things he's saying are ringing true with me. My conversation with him is like, man, how could you be so selfish? He had a wife, he had kids, how could you do this? And Tom looked at me and he said, hey, Cord, you don't understand. You get to a point where the only way to end the pain is to end your life. And that's the only choice you see that you can use. So, and then the next day is when it happened. But, it's hard for maybe to relate to, like if you've never been in that spot, it's really hard to be there. But when you talk to people, and I'm sure you talk to plenty of people where you're like, wow, it's just such a deep, dark hole that there's nothing else they can do. Yeah.
And I think it's something that we have to try to further understand as a society, and certainly when it comes to this population. The suicide rates are through the roof, man. So there's something going on, right? There's something that we're missing, and I think the further we can explore this, and one of the things that I think makes first responder wellness so effective is that when these men and women come here, they can talk about that. They can talk about the fact that they've had these ideations. They can talk about the fact that, hey, you know what? There was a point in time when I had a plan, and, we don't applaud it and we don't condone it, right? But at the same time, we normalize it in the ways of like, we understand, right? We understand how trauma compiled on trauma can get you into a position where you start experiencing anxieties and depressions, and depression does nothing but lie. Depression does nothing but lie to people, and it closes the doors on all of the things that used to bring them joy. It isolates them to a point where they feel like a burden to everybody, and you hear that all the time, right? It's like, I just don't want to be a burden to anybody else. And so it closes them in to this idea that they'll just be better off without me. And you hear them talk about it. And I think one of the things that makes it so effective is the fact that they can actually hear it. Because, and you know this, right? Like, your buddy wasn't able to say, yeah, Tom didn't say, Tom just said, you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point where the only option you have to end the pain is to end your life. And he probably didn't feel like he could just be like, and that's what I'm going through right now. Nobody feels like they can just tell somebody like, hey, man, I'm in so much pain. For whatever reason, my head's telling me the best thing I can do is end my life.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know how to handle that, to the point where sometimes I feel like if people just have that outlet and can actually talk honestly about it, we can get them away from it.
And that's kind of my drive now is so currently I have like all the Orange County contracts for the counseling team, so the police and fire in Orange County, and Dr. Nancy Panza, I don't know if you know her. She came and she talked to the OC Chief Police meeting maybe like a month ago, and she tells a story about how she had an article of a police suicide, and this is years and years ago, and she hung it up on her bulletin board and was like, how am I going to stop this? And what she's come up with wellness visits. What we've been going to agencies, a bunch of different agencies together, and pitching, hey, we really recommend at least a yearly wellness visit. So the wellness visit isn't, no notes are taken, nothing's going back to the department,
beautiful.
Right? It's an opportunity for police, fire, whoever, dispatchers, anyone to come in and just sit down and kind of make it
off the record,
a normal process.
That's just,
yeah, they're not going to take any notes. They're not going to say anything. I mean, and just kind of see what it's like to get in there with someone and see it's not a horrible thing to go in there and talk to someone. And, my push is to make it mandatory, which, is a bad word in police and fire, right? But the reality is if you can save one life by getting them in there and forcing them, I mean, you're paying them to sit in there for an hour and do it on duty. I mean, they don't have to go take any calls for an hour or whatever it is. Sometimes we'll just crack the door enough. They're like, maybe this wasn't that bad. Maybe I will now call a number. Maybe I will kind of talk about what's bothering me. And she has it worked out really well with a therapist where even if the person doesn't want to talk, that's fine. The therapist will kind of, let me tell you about myself. I was married to a cop fireman, or I used to be a cop fireman. Here's some of the things she dealt with, I dealt with, whatever it is, and kind of give some normalcy to like, hey, it's okay not to be great. You know what I mean? It's a tough job. And there's no way you're going to get through it and never have an issue, never see something traumatic, never have something bother you. And you got to unload that, and that hopefully that once a year, and there's a few agencies that are starting to buy into it, and my goal hopefully is to get every agency where that mandatory one, because a lot of the guys that need the help, if you make it voluntary, they're not going to show up. Right. They're going to say, I don't need that. That's a bunch of crap, right? But you make them go, and there's often, those are the guys that all of a sudden will talk more than anyone else and be like, I'm glad someone forced me to do this because I really needed to get this off my chest. So that's kind of the drive now where I'm at, and I hope that it really kind of catches on and starts spreading around for, it should be, mandatory for everyone in any kind of job like this. So.
Yeah, and I agree, right? There's a way to incentivize people to do this. And I think when we look at it in the aspects of like having it more normalized and available, right? Because I talk to these guys about this all the time. When they're here and they're going through their journeys and all of this stuff, and they're getting ready to be out on their, go back to work or go back home or whatever it is, and they're going to deploy their aftercare plans and stuff like that. I tell them while they're here, right? While you're here, find those 2 or 3 people that you're going to call every day. Mm-hmm. Every single day, you're going to call and check in with them. They're going to call and check in with you, or at least every other day. I mean, whatever it is reasonable to make contact with these certain individuals regularly, right? I get it. Maybe you're not going to call somebody every day, but at the same time, when things are going well, call. Because what happens is you set up these patterns, and this is what you're talking about, right? Because if we could set this up to where these guys got to go sit down in front of somebody, even if they tell me, hey, everything's great, man, I'm doing fine, okay, cool. Good. We'll hang out for the next 45 minutes to an hour. I'll tell you about my kids. You can tell me about yours. Good. Okay, great. I'll see you in 3 weeks, right? It's a regular thing to where you go 6 months without talking to somebody and shit hits the fan. I don't know if I can say shit hits the fan, but I just did. You're not going to pick up the phone. You're gonna go into your head and you're gonna say, you know what, I haven't talked to anybody. Why should I start talking to anybody now? And your head's gonna start lying to you and telling you you're a burden and all that shit. If you've been talking with somebody on a regular basis, and we're gonna have our call, and I don't call you, but you call me, guess what? There's a real good chance I'm gonna talk about what's going on, because we're periodically checking in with each other. And this is where I think peer support is so important too, right? Like peer support can really engage with these guys and get a pulse on them and just check in with them. And you check in with the guy 10 times and he tells you that he's great, cool. But then what about the 11th time when he tells you, you know what, I'm not all right. Now we're doing something. So I agree with you 100%. We've got to figure out a way to get this more accessible and just a normalized thing to where they're talking to professionals and they're dealing with whatever it is. I love what you said. It's like, if we offered you a free personal trainer, you'd be on it in a minute, right? Those guys, if we gave you all the supplements and all the stuff that you wanted, you'd be signing up every single day, right? When it comes to your physical health, you'll invest all the time, energy, and effort that you can. But the minute we start talking about your mental health, I'm good.
Yeah, and like to your point, you don't want to wait till your wit's end to find that person you can talk to.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's what a lot of guys do.
Exactly,
they don't
what
reach
happens.
out. So I really encourage them, like, even if you just meet someone and talk to them a little bit, can be comfortable with someone, by the time you get to the point where you really need to talk to someone, now you have someone. You can't wait till the very end, and think you're going to jump in with someone. So that's why it's important to get there early.
Yep. And we're used to it. I know you, you know me. It's a regular thing. I'm not picking up the phone to dial an 800 number and talk to whoever picks up the phone. It's like, I know you. I've seen you, right? You're going to look at me and I'm going to go, yeah, no, I'm okay. And you're going to go, no, you're not. There's something different. There's something off. And the professionals can do that, right? If you give them the opportunity to get a read on you and get to know you, they can look at you and go, no, I don't think so. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what's going on? And to your point, I love working with this population because it's funny on some level where, and especially the law enforcement guys, right? The cops come in and they don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust you. I don't even trust other cops. That's great. I'm not talking to anybody. Cool. I'm not going to make you talk. I'll pull them in my office and just, hey, man, I just wanted to check in with you, see how you're doing. Dude, you can't get them to shut up.
Right.
They won't stop talking.
Right.
It's just, you give them the opportunity, and a lot of it has to do with trust. Once we build that trust, and you give them the opportunity, and man, they're talking, and you can tell, you're just like, man, this person just has not had the opportunity to actually talk and focus on like themselves and what's going on in their lives, right? They always have to have the answers.
Right.
They're always the ones asking the questions. They're always the ones solving the problems. So when they're sitting on the other side and they're like, you're asking me the questions and I have, and they get going, it's wonderful.
You mentioned peer support too, and peer support's a big kind of element of this too. When I go talk to like peer support teams and do different things with them, there's a big onus on peer support to reach out. It's easy not to reach out. You see a guy in trouble, gal in trouble, it's easy to kind of like, oh, I'm sure they're fine. Like,
right.
No, it's you got to be willing to work there. You got to be able to step out of your comfort zone and say, hey, you don't seem right. What's going on? And if they tell you no the first 2 times and you still notice it, you got to go back the 3rd time, right? You can't give up. So I often talk to those peer supporters, and that's a big onus on them too. Like, it's hard. That's why we have, some of those peer support retreats they go to, because taking on other people's trauma is a big deal, right? It's something really hard. So they got to watch out for themselves also.
100%.
But I always kind of end those briefings like, the only people that are going to help you guys are each other. These 6 guys sitting in briefing, you can't be scared to talk to each other. You can't be scared to say like, oh man, that kind of jacked me up, or whatever it is, whatever kind of craziness you saw. Like, it's okay to say, hey, that bothered me. Let's talk about it. So I think fire sometimes is better because, they go back to the station and hopefully they talk about the station. Police is a little tougher because you get in your car and you go drive to
and you're by
a parking lot and you're by yourself thinking about it, right? So But we got to learn to, and the more diffusings and debriefings we're doing, I think we're getting much, much better at it. And then people are much, much more open to it. And I just hope that really kind of creates a trend where it's easier to do for everyone. So.
Yeah. And again, to your point, it's like the more that we're showing up to offer the assistance, to offer the resources, eventually they're gonna understand, like, oh, we just had this shitty call, we had this horrific thing happen, we're gonna get back to the department and they're gonna show up, we're gonna have to do this debriefing, right? And at some point they're gonna be like, yeah, you know what, that did bother me, or pull them out in the hallway, right? Fine, do whatever we got to do to get you to start talking about it. But I think the more resources that we can have, peer support, all of these debriefings, whatever it is that we can do to normalize the fact that, it's going to affect you. And why wouldn't it? It's one of the first things I tell them when it comes to dealing with post-traumatic stress. You got to understand that is a normal human response to prolonged periods of stress and trauma. And I said, what's the first word I said? PTSD? I said, normal. It is a normal response. It's a normal human response. Let's normalize the fact that, you're going to have adverse effects to prolonged periods of stress and trauma and all of the things that you're dealing with, right? Even if it's just the sheer volume, when you look at what fire, right? So I was fortunate enough to run a 24-hour ride along with Long Beach Fire, Station 10. Those guys are incredible, man. We ran like 20 calls, right? From the time I got there to the time I left the next day. Now, some of them were for pretty heavy calls, and they did a lot of work, and some of them were just those BS calls. But just the sheer volume of what they had to deal with was stressful in itself, right? From the time I got there at like 7:30 that morning until 6 o'clock the next morning, it was nonstop. I think from like 3:30 to maybe 5, there wasn't a call. But prior to that, there were calls constantly, right? And so they're up, they're going, they're out, right? They're in that box or they're on that rig, and they're going out to these like 20 different times. And I'm also watching the hospital that they have to go to every time they take somebody, right? And there's what's just outside of those emergency door rooms? Another ambulance behind another ambulance, right? And so they're just picking them up, dropping them off, picking them up, stabilize them, dropping them, right? Like there's just the sheer volume alone. Even if it wasn't overly traumatic, you're just exhausted from the sheer volume alone. I was sitting there at 6 o'clock the next morning, right? Thinking to myself, I gotta go home, right? I don't have a whole lot to do. I can probably get some rest. I'm watching one guy get ready to, go out and do it all again that day. And then another guy's packing his stuff up, going home. He's telling me, now I gotta go take my kid to soccer practice, and, I gotta go be a husband and a dad. I was like, dude, that guy's just been there for 3 or 4 days, whatever it is, just doing this every single night. And now he's got to go home and be a dad. Now he's got to go home and be a husband. Like I got to go home and go to sleep. My wife was like, hey, what was it like? I said, I don't know. Talk to me in a few hours. Not these guys.
And it's you got to completely shift your personality. You got to completely shift your mindset, right? These guys are at a 9 or 10 for, 24 hours a day. And now they got to try to go home and be relaxed with their kids. And, that's the kind of thing you see in this profession is going home. You're short with your family.
All of it.
I mean, it's hard to really kind of wind down and realize like I said, I got lucky. There's some people that talked to me about that early in my life about, hey, you got to be able to separate these two things. But that's not easy. Like, no, I'm making it sound like it's easy. It's 100% not easy. It's something that, I struggled with. Everybody struggled with. There's no way you don't struggle with it. So, I wish we had more answers, but you're right. Offering the resources, I think it's incumbent on, department heads, the chiefs of these agencies to start from the top and say like, hey, this is important to me. I want you guys to get help. I want you guys to be healthy. And we're seeing more and more of that. So that really is, kind of given me hope that it's beginning to become the new norm, that we want you to be healthy. We want you to make it through your career and whatever you need. A lot of agencies now, and I don't know if you've even heard this, but there's some agencies now that will give you like administrative time off, saying, just come to me.
Yeah.
You tell me you need help. I'll give you 90 days off.
Yep.
Well, and don't worry about it. Your job's here. We want you to come back. I mean,
and that is one of the biggest things that when people get to us and we have those departments that are willing to do that are willing to take them off on administrative leave and then tell them, because that's the one thing, you know what I mean, one of the bigger pieces to this is that everybody says, I can't take this time, right? Like, I'm the breadwinner, man. I'm bringing home the money. Like, bills got to get paid. Like, I can't just take this time off of work and not get paid. And the department steps in and says, that's cool, we're going to pay you. Go take care of yourself. There's so much stress and resistance taken off of them when they do that versus the guys who are like trying to scramble to get everything together and figure out if the department is going to be supportive or not. Some guys are like, I'm not even filing FMLA. I'm going to burn my own time, which stresses them out. Right. But those departments that are saying, nope, here you go. You go down there. You get yourself right. Let them help you. We're gonna, the check's gonna be in the bank account, man. The wife will pay the bills. Good deal. Let's go. That's huge. That in itself is huge. Ultimately, we want to get to a position where they don't even have to come to us, right?
Sure.
I love my job, but if we were able to solve this problem without having to have this place, I think I could figure out something else to do. But ultimately, that would be the route to go. And when these departments can start looking at this as a line on the budget, right? Like when they're filling in for their budgets, and that is a resource that they're filling in for, then we're doing something, So tell us just a little bit about exactly what it is that you're doing for first responder wellness, and you've talked a little bit about navigating things with peer support in these departments, but what is it exactly that you're doing?
So every Orange County agency has a contract with the counseling team. I manage those contracts, and I'll go, maybe twice a year to different briefings and say, hey, do you guys know that you have 10 free visits a year or whatever it is? And sometimes they look at me like, we do,
What? Nobody told me.
So, right. So to make sure they're aware of what they have, I tell them the story. I tell them the story about Tom. I tell them, hey, untreated trauma, it's going to come back to bite you, and here's an example of it. So get out there and go help. I do a lot of executive orientations where I'll go talk to the chiefs, because sometimes, there's turnover of these chiefs. They don't know what's in their contract and what they have available. We do, different trainings for peer support groups. If they have, we have a peer support meeting, I'll come with maybe one of the therapists, and we'll pick a topic, whatever's interesting to them, and train the peer support team on that. And mostly just outreach. I'll go to some health fairs, and everyone comes by. We just did something at Huntington. They had that it's like for 9/11. It was like a fitness challenge there.
Oh yeah, for open water.
Open water, yeah.
And, I did it last year. I was in Arrowhead this year. I did it last year. I couldn't walk for a week afterwards. Those bleachers killed me, man.
There were 3 people in the program that came and did it. So that's great. So anything like that, any kind of outreach for Orange County, I'm going out there and trying to get the word out. And hopefully, each one of those briefings, one person, I always, before I leave, I break them down a little bit, and I'm like, all right, who's going to call and make an appointment, right?
Yeah, good deal.
Sometimes you get blank stares, right? But then oftentimes I'll get calls afterwards, like, what, I called, made an appointment, thanks for that. So,
nice.
Yeah, one at a time, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, the new wellness visits, I really hope we can get a push on that. And just making people aware of what's out there. And even though the wellness here coming into the center, a lot of people don't know that's available.
Right.
And we talk about that. We kind of talk about training. We talk about retreats, all the different things. I tell them some of my experiences when I was here during the 3 months, and whether it be ART or EMDR, or there's just so many different things. Going to do sound baths or yoga, or like, try it all and try it, figure out what works for you. Like, well, why are we not trying these things? So just kind of encouraging them to get out there and try different things.
Nice. So you're just doing a ton of outreach for counseling team, which is great. And I love the fact that you're just kind of bringing to the surface, like, hey, you guys even know that this is available, right? And creating those relationships so that they know what the resources are. And what's available to them, and how to access that. Sometimes people understand that they have resources, and maybe they understand, oh yeah, I hear we have these 10 free sessions to the counseling team, but who do I call? What do I do? How do I access it? And I think making that as streamlined as possible too, right? It's like when they make the decision to make the call, it is such a big responsibility for us on the other end to make sure that we pick that phone up and that we follow through with everything it is that they need, right?
And kind of addressing a lot of the fears they have too.
Sure.
Like, okay, what's going to get reported back to my agency? Are they going to know that I called? Is someone going to start talking about me? All these different things. Are they going to give me a fit for duty? Am I going to have to go out IOD? What's going to happen? So just kind of talking through all those things with them and making them realize, like, it really is as easy as dialing this number, giving them your name, saying you want to come talk to someone for whatever it is, you or a lot of contracts have your family members, your kids or whatever, make an appointment for them, and nobody's ever going to know. And unless you tell them. And you know what? A lot of those guys, the best briefings are usually when I have someone in there and they stand up or raise their hand and say, hey, you know what? I've called. I was going through a divorce or whatever it was, and I needed someone to talk to. It really helped me. And then you see everyone turn their head and kind of look at them like, whoa. That guy called? Like,
we never knew.
I never thought that guy would call. And he says how much it helps him, and hopefully that triggers them. Well, like, if that old crusty guy called, you know what I mean?
I can do it.
I can do it too. So that's kind of, it's good to see that turn. And it's kind of a cultural thing in different agencies too. Some agencies, it seems okay. Some agencies, it's not okay. So we're cracking through. So, I mean, the work you guys do here, the work through the counseling team, it's making a difference for sure.
Yeah, and I think we're on a big uptick. I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about just can't be ignored anymore. You just can't ignore the fact that the suicide rates are through the roof. You can't ignore the fact that more and more of our first responders are having to medically retire because of mental health issues, or they're just walking off the job. They're finding that it's not worth it. So there's a lot that's happening that we just can't ignore as a society, and certainly as people who work in this space. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get to a position where everybody understands what's available to them and they start utilizing the resources. One of the things that I love to watch here at the treatment center is that, and you probably saw this a lot while you were here, is that you'll get the new person that comes in, man, and they're all wide-eyed, their knees are knocking, they're terrified, and they're sitting there and they're watching and listening, and they can't believe the people that have been here for a little while, and they're like, we don't talk about that stuff. What are they doing? And these guys are just talking freely about their feelings and what they've been going through and what they're learning, and they're blown away at the fact that how vulnerable these men and women are being, and how they're just diving in and getting it done. And we've been able to cultivate and create a space that allows them to do that. But watching that look on their face, it's like, this isn't okay, man. We're not supposed to do this, and it just goes to show you the culture of how just don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, man. Just keep moving through it. Just push it, and it's just not working. You can't just keep shoving things down and not have it, affect you, mentally, emotionally. It impedes on your relationships. I mean, it bleeds out in every area of your life. So it's just, I'm thankful that you're here and doing what it is that you're doing to, be a big part of this organization and the team, and out there making these relationships and connecting the dots and having the experience that you've had. It's an honor to hear Tom's story and see that that's kind of the driving factor in like what it is that you're doing and why it is that you're doing it. So many times, tragic things like that don't motivate people to do the right things. And I think you're able to take that as difficult as that is, and move it towards the idea of like, what, if we can just help one person, if we can help one person, then we're doing something that, ultimately we would have wanted for him. So that's as honorable as one person can get, to honor him in that way. I don't think anybody could do any better. So that's pretty cool. So as we were talking before we got into the podcast conversation, you mentioned something about a green patch that you wanted to talk a little bit about.
That's one thing we did at Westminster before I left, which was, I'm pretty sure it started Albuquerque PD was the first one for Mental Health Awareness Month. You know how we have all these patches now,
Yep.
like pink patches, camouflage,
breast cancer,
right,
all
whatever
that stuff.
it is, right? They had developed a green patch. It's like a Kelly green, and it's supposed to be like rebirth is the idea.
Okay.
And they started it in Albuquerque PD. So I saw this article, and I went to our Westminster chief, and I said, what do you think about this? So we created this green patch, and then he actually came up with another idea, and we have a big, huge wall, maybe like as big as where that first responder wellness sign is there, and painted it this bright Kelly green and put the 2 photos of our 2 officers who committed suicide on that wall. And a quote in between them that says it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, it's a sign of strength. So those 2 photos are up there for everyone to walk by and be like, hey, what's the story with this? Kind of keeps the story alive. And now for Mental Health Awareness Month, they wear that green patch. I haven't seen any other agencies pick it up. Hopefully we'll get some other agencies to pick it up. I know Bud's Odyssey.
Yeah.
We gave them a bunch of patches, and they sell the patches at different events and different things like that. So
yeah,
that would be cool if somehow one day here we all had these green patches for Mental Health Awareness Month, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing I'd like to see happen. Yeah.
And anybody that's got these positions at these departments, you guys hear what he's talking about. It sounds like a simple project to me.
Yeah.
Put some money towards getting a mental health awareness patch. What's wrong with that?
Exactly.
Right? I think it's something that's, it's something that's effective, and it's something in the ways of just raising that awareness, man. And I think the more that we can normalize the struggles that our first responders go through when it comes to mental health, and allowing them the space and the opportunity to be able to talk about it. I talk a lot about what it is that we expect out of these men and women, and how the expectations oftentimes are just unreasonable, that we expect so much out of them. And I think oftentimes they try to live up to those expectations, and that's where so many things go wrong, and I just want the message to be that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have things affect you. I say this often, and I learned early on that I will never refer to first responders as heroes. I won't do it. And the reason being is that I believe that you guys are heroic people when you do heroic things. But I think when we put labels on people like heroes, they try to live up to those expectations. And heroes don't make mistakes, right? Heroes always win. Heroes always save the day. And unfortunately, that's not a realistic expectation. There's going to be tragic things that happen regardless of how well you followed the tactics and how well you executed the plan. There's going to be things that are out of your control, and the idea that you have to be perfect all the time, it's unobtainable. And so I won't do it. I won't, I'll thank anybody. I'm indebted to so many first responders for all of the things that they've done and all the things that they'll continue to do. I believe that you're brave and heroic, and you're cut from a different cloth, because there's not everybody runs towards gunfire, man. Not everybody runs into burning buildings. But you're also not superhuman. You also don't possess these powers that allow you to just not be affected by these things. And so I don't think anybody intentionally ever set out to put these expectations on our first responders. I think it's an unintentional thing. But it's something that I really just I find that I won't do it. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to expect people to be heroes all the time.
Right.
It's just not.
I appreciate that. I never really kind of thought about that from perspective. Something I learned right now, kind of thinking about that undue pressure, right? That we're all putting on ourselves, and that pressure probably has something to do with why we don't want to ask for help, right?
A ton of reasons.
Because heroes don't ask for help, right?
Heroes don't ask for help.
Superman's not asking anyone to help him.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's, again, I don't think it's anybody's intent. And oftentimes it's a subconscious thing. I don't know if anybody ever say, hey, yeah, I know they look at me as a hero. But on some level, I feel like I've listened to hundreds of men and women talk about not being able to meet the expectations. And that's where the self-loathing and shame and guilt sets in. And it's like, ultimately we get this stuff that happened with Tom, and I have to imagine that was some part of what he went through, is this idea of like, I'm supposed to be a hero, I'm supposed to be a guy who doesn't make mistakes, and I made an ultimate mistake. which is all it was. It was a freak accident. It was an ultimate mistake, and ultimately he couldn't get through that in his life.
You made me think of something else now too. When you mentioned guilt, that's kind of a theme. Sometimes issues I have, I feel guilty about certain things,
Sure.
I don't know, silly things, but you're right. I think that probably stems from kind of the job, and we have a lot of guilt when we can't save that person. When, every time we go to a call and something bad happens, like, man, could I have been here sooner? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? And I think that probably transitions into a lot of people's lives outside of the job and makes
100%.
it difficult. So,
yep. One of the biggest pieces that we work on with, and certainly what I work on when I'm facilitating groups, is helping people to understand that, the difference between guilt and shame. And oftentimes not meeting those expectations, people have shame around those. And the difference between guilt and shame is that guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am something bad. And when they don't meet those expectations, they because the culture says they're supposed to be perfect all of the time, and the culture beats that into you, right?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you get I got a 99, could have been 100, could have been 100, right? Like, nobody's going, hey, great job, bro, you got 99. No, I got 100, should have been 100, right? And so what happens is they start to feel shame when they didn't get there on time. Must be there. I must be flawed. I must be imperfect, right? Yeah, we're all flawed. We're all imperfect. And when you start to compartmentalize and hold the shame the way that they do, it's just toxic. It's toxic, and pretty soon they're just comparing all of the mistakes that they've ever made, and it gets amplified. It gets bigger and bigger in their lives, in other areas of their lives. And one of the things that we help them to understand is that's not your identity. Right. You're not flawed because you made the mistake. You're human, right? You want to have some guilt around some things that you did, cool, let's move through that. Guilt is about the behavior. Guilt is about the act, not the actor, right? Like, you're not bad. Was the behavior bad? Sure. Who doesn't have bad behavior from time to time? I'm certainly not perfect when it comes to those things, but it doesn't mean that I'm a bad human being. Doesn't mean that they're a bad law enforcement officer. Doesn't mean they're a bad firefighter, right? What it means is that they made a mistake. And so it's difficult oftentimes for them to do that. And I think there's a lot for society to learn about the expectations that we have of these men and women. They're held to such a higher expectation. And it's interesting, being able to be with this population now for 7+ years, and I can watch things and I can go, there's something going on with that guy, right? There's something going on with that girl. That's why they acted or reacted that way. It's not because they just went they were bullied through high school and that's why they got a badge and that's why he beat that guy up. It's like, no, he's probably suffering from tons of trauma and, fight or flight. I mean, there's just so much that's involved with what happens, and people want to make snap judgments on bad behavior. It doesn't mean they're bad actors.
Right.
It just doesn't. It doesn't. We've got to do a better job at providing resources and helping people so that, and we've got to understand, at the end of the day, they're human beings and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. I also learned that nobody likes a bad cop more than a cop, man.
Oh.
Cops don't like bad cops, man,
It
and
ruins
it's just
it.
like, it really does. And the more I have worked with law enforcement, the more I've seen, like, I don't know if I've ever met a bad cop, dude. The more I see, they're just people who got off course and needed a way back. Ultimately, they signed up for a thankless job to help people in their worst times, But yeah, that's a good deal. So is there anything else that you want to add to or talk about while we're here?
No, I appreciate you having me in, and I think you kind of hit it on the head a little while ago, and I've heard Dr. Odom say it himself, like, the ultimate goal is not to even have this wellness center, right? I mean, if this place would be empty, we'd all be happy, right?
Yeah.
But I think we're a long way from that. You guys are doing incredible things here, and that's why I love being here. But I think if we get it on the front end as much as we can and change that culture, like we can make a big difference to Law and Fire and everyone that comes here. And that's the hope and that's the dream. So
and I tell you, it's such an important piece to have somebody like you out there, you know, to be able to relate to people from, you know, coming from somebody who's retired and has worked in the field. That carries a lot of weight. You know, I think people can look at that and say, hey, you know what, here's a guy who's 28 years in the departments and did all the things that he did, 25 years in SWAT, and he's preaching this mental health stuff. Maybe there's something to it, right? It's not just some clinician off the street coming through trying to tell us that we need help, right? So I think it's vital to, you know, the overall goal in closing this place down, you know. So I appreciate the fact that you're out there doing it, man. So it's been an honor and a privilege to sit here with you and get to know you a little bit better. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and be with us. So that is all I have for today. So I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Of course.